We are here today chatting with Shelby. Shelby is one of our former Family Source surrogates. And Shelby, I'm super excited to get to hear your story. I know we have heard your intended parents story twice already. They were on our podcast not too long ago, and they have such an amazing story, both of them. So I'm excited to hear your version of the story. So go ahead and kind of start what led you into surrogacy, and then just go into telling about your journey.
Okay. So after I had my first son, I really just loved being pregnant. I had a really easy labor. And so that was like my first thought about possibly being a surrogate at some point, because I knew we didn't want a whole lot of kids, but I really love being pregnant. So it's kind of like this was the option. And so probably the first people I really told about it, other than my husband, was my students. I used to teach high school geometry. And so we were talking about like big life goals and things that we really want to do in our lives. And that was the one that I was like, this is like my big dream. If I could do anything that was kind of crazy, this would be it. So I have students that would still come back and be like, hey, are you going to do this? And so finally, when I looked into it more, and the big thing is like, you really want to be done with your own family. And we knew we wanted at least one or two more. So I kind of put it on the back burner for a little bit. Then I had my second son, and that's when I started to really think like, I think we're good with 2 kids. Maybe this is my opportunity. And I was teaching summer school, and one of the teachers I taught with had been a surrogate. And so it was like I had this source of knowledge right next door to me. And so I got a lot of information from her, and she actually introduced me to the first family that I went through the process with. So we just met and we started texting and talking through Facebook Messenger. And we decided like, if we were going to do this, we needed to have an agency, just because there's so many like intricate parts, and there's too much for like, I felt like us to do properly. So we looked at a lot of different agencies, and Family Source was the one that we decided was the best fit for us. So they had 1 embryo left. We transferred that embryo September of 2019, and it did not take. And so that was their last embryo. They knew like, if this doesn't work, then this is just like God's plan in our life, that this is it. So luckily, I mean, of course there was like some sadness surrounding it, but it was also kind of like this confirmation that they were done in a way. My desire to be a surrogate didn't go away. And so in October of 2019, Susan Taylor was talking to me about like what kind of family I'd be interested in now that it's more of like the matching process. And so I told her what I was looking for. And the big thing is I wanted somebody that like really wanted to have a relationship with me also. And then I would consider myself like very pro-life, and not just in an abortion sense, but like pro-life for all people. Sure. So that was important to me also, that I would be with a family that wouldn't ask that of me. Mm-hmm. And I was informed that maybe it would take a little bit longer to find somebody that was also on that kind of track. But within a week, they sent me the profile for my intended parents, and I just loved their profile. I was showing my husband, I was like, look at these people. They just love each other. The parts in the profile where they like talk about one another was like what really got me. Like the way that they spoke about each other, the parents did. And then they had pictures of their family, and they were just so precious. So we met them during a Zoom call in November. We decided, yes, let's go forward with this. December 27th of 2019, my husband and I flew to St. Louis to do the medical screening. We got to meet our intended parents, and it was really neat because December 27th was like the 5-year date to the mom's, like her cancer journey kind of started. That's when she found out about everything. That's when she met with the RE for the first time. So it was kind of like this weird, amazing like thing. It was like a really big day for her, and then it turned into a big day for us, because that was like the day that we had the medical screening, the whole process really started for us. So the medical screening went well. My thyroid was kind of high. And so I was put on some medication to get that back down into normal range. The goal for us was to transfer in like March, and then COVID happened.
Yes.
So yeah, the thyroid stuff and COVID kind of pushed our transfer date back. And so my mother and I flew to St. Louis for the embryo transfer we transferred June 15th, which was actually my wedding anniversary. So another like important day that kind of overlapped between our lives. And so my mom and I actually stayed with the intended parent's mother. So we got to stay with her and just really like get to know them in a different way. We got to meet their kids, and I just love how much they love their family. So it's like another confirmation, like we're doing the right thing. This is good. And we got pregnant. So I had a really easy pregnancy at the beginning. I wasn't sick. Nothing major happened until about the 18-week mark. I woke up, had a lot of stuff that you don't want happening whenever you're pregnant. And we really thought that we were miscarrying. I got a hold of my intended mother really quickly so that she knew what was going on. I wanted it to be like a relationship where I never felt like I couldn't tell her. So if I was feeling weird or something odd was happening, that was the first person that I wanted to know, or wanted her to know, because this is her child. She deserves that. And she was always really receptive and encouraging. And so it was kind of a scary moment because we really thought we were losing little baby boy. But when we got to the doctor, we found out through a sonogram that I just had placenta previa, which is just like the placenta was hanging really low, like right on top of my cervix. So it caused problems. Yeah. So that was a really scary moment for me. But it also because, people ask how could you give up a baby? I don't understand how you can handle that, like your emotions, your physical stuff. But it's odd that scary moment throughout the journey, solidified that I was going to be okay emotionally, because I wasn't sad for myself.
Right.
Whenever this was happening and the unknown of it all, I was sad for them, because it wasn't like I was losing my child, they were losing theirs. So yes. I think that, as scary as it was this moment that I was like, I can do this. Come February, March, whenever it's really time for the birth, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. I'm going to be able to give them up, because there's no feeling in me that this is mine to keep. Right. It's just, I'm here to help grow this life and love on him until it's time to pass him over. So as scary as it was kind of good. So after that, we had multiple sonograms just to kind of watch the placenta move up. Normally it's something that resolves itself, and luckily mine did. So the parents and the family were able to come for the 20-week appointment, the anatomy scan, and the intended mother was able to go with me to the appointment, and it was just amazing. I never cried in my own sonograms for my own children, but this one I sure had a few tears, because it's the emotion that it was for her and the happiness that I felt for her in the moment. Anatomy scan was good. That was the first sign that the placenta was moving up. And then the next couple of weeks we had more. And then once we knew the placenta was up and away from the cervix, we were good to go. I was measuring pretty far ahead. At one point, I think I was measuring 4 or 5 weeks ahead. And so we had another sonogram just to see how large he was. And due to that sonogram, they decided we should induce early. I have gone with my own children. I went on time and late. So the intended mother and her mom came into town February 15th. I think was the date, which is right in the middle of that huge ice storm that we had we live in Amarillo, so like through Texas, and they had it up through Oklahoma and a little bit in Kansas. And so they were going to drive, and then that didn't work out. So they tried to fly, and it just kind of was some crazy times. And finally they got here, and so they got here and school was canceled because of, you know, all the blackouts throughout the state. So it was kind of nice because then I could just see them, you know, once the snow thawed out and I could get to them, I was able to see them without the fear of like me not having to go back to work or whatever. So they got to, and the intended mother got to go to my last doctor's appointment and meet my doctor and ask whatever questions that she needed. And I think that was kind of like a relief to her in a way, because like she finally got to meet this person that's going to be like a big part of like a big moment in their lives.
Yes.
So, and she got to ask all the questions that she was concerned about. So I was going to be induced on February 24th, and there were so many moms in the hospital. I'm assuming all COVID babies.
Yeah.
You know, made during quarantine.
Yeah.
So they were pretty full. So finally they got me in around noon. We started Pitocin. They broke my water about 5, and my body, I don't think was ready to have a baby. And so it was a super, super slow process. I didn't end up having him until I was 2:24 in the morning on February 25th. So he still was born at 2:24, but it's not the right date. So the labor was really, really long, but it was a great opportunity for my husband and I to really get to know both of the intended parents. I was able to have my husband, and then both intended parents were able to be in the room with me during the birth, which was kind of, I feel like, unheard of during this like time of COVID. Other moms in the hospital like that were giving birth were just able to have one, but with our circumstances, we got to have the parents in there as well. So our like 14-hour labor, which doesn't sound that long when I say it out loud, but so that really long labor gave us an opportunity to really get to know each other like again in a way, in person and not just over texting.
Sure.
My mom and the intended mother's mom actually sat in the cafeteria and just talked and waited because they thought we'd have the baby before, you know, hours were over. But then they had to go home because it didn't happen that early. So I had him 2:24 in the morning, and then all the other moms on the floor started having babies too. Mm-hmm. So then the intended parents actually ended up staying in our room for another, like, I think 3 hours, which was still really great because I was like, I got to be in those like first moments with her and see them. But the birth was just like, I can't even describe like the feelings that were in the room. We had a nurse that was supposed to get off at midnight, and she was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here until this is over because I just want to be in this moment. And she actually ended up being, when she like first walked into the room around like 8, when the shift change happened, I was like, oh, you were a substitute for me. So when I was in high school, she was a teacher of mine.
Oh, wow.
So we had this weird connection, and then we knew all these people. We had a lot of acquaintances and mutual friends. So it's like I had this like another friend that was there to support me in the moment. And then she just didn't leave. She was like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to see it through. We're going to get this baby out. I was her only like patient on the floor because she was like a half-time worker. And so, I mean, she was doing all the things to try to get me to have this baby. So, we had him at 2:24, and the cord was wrapped around his neck. So we couldn't do like the immediate skin to skin contact with the mom like we were wanting to. But he turned out to be fine. He was just a little blue at the beginning, but he finally let out this big cry, and there were just tears everywhere. And the nurse that decided that she was going to stay took the phone from the intended father, and she was just snapping pictures like crazy. And so it's like we have all these moments now in pictures where we're all in the pictures with little baby boy. And like, I'm so grateful for that. And so thankful that like she took the time to be like, oh, let me get these like memories that we probably wouldn't have because you couldn't have like a photographer in there or, you know. So baby boy was great. He was 9'3", so not small. So not as big as he would have been if we went all straight to 4 weeks. So
yeah.
And then they got to spend like 3 hours after that in the room. As I started to kind of go through the healing process. I did get an epidural this time. So, I mean, I wasn't moving at all. So since we had him so late in the day or late in the morning, I guess, we ended up staying a whole extra night. So I stayed the night of the 25th, and then I was discharged that Friday. They were discharged like that Friday afternoon, and they stayed another night, but they really wanted to get home to their kids, which I totally understand. But before they drove home, they brought baby boy over to our house and my kids got to meet him, but once they left. And so it was really great for like my kids to kind of get to see it through in a way. Like they had seen my stomach grow and have to deal with trying to sit on my lap, and they couldn't. So I was really happy that they got to see them and everything. And I get pictures pretty often. I get to FaceTime him, but he is precious, and it was amazing. And I'm just so happy that I got to be a part of this like big piece of their life.
When you began this journey, I mean, even the first time when the transfer did not take, did you have like full support from friends and family? I know you taught school, so you have a whole host of kids, with their own opinion, especially. Did you have support, or did you have any drawback from any of people around you?
When I first was looking into it and I had first been introduced to that family, I didn't really tell my parents until I started talking to that first family. I think I had mentioned here and there, oh, I'd love to, be a surrogate, have a baby for somebody. And it was kind of offhand comments, maybe if a friend or my sister-in-law couldn't have a baby, I would love to do that for them. But I didn't really have that conversation with my mom, I'm actually going to do this. Mm-hmm. She was pretty scared, not unsupportive, but just scared for my mental, my physical, all of that, the aspects of that. She never was unsupportive to the way, to the point of I don't want you to do this because I think it's stupid. There was concerns with my husband's family, but I think once we were able to have conversations about it, they were on board. And their concerns are more for if something happens to me and then their grandchildren and their son are left without their mom and wife, that was kind of the concern. But those are really just at the beginning. And everybody at that point was super supportive. My church group that I was with, they just thought it was the coolest thing. And they're kind of of course, this is what you would do. But especially my kids at school, I think they're the funniest ones because they just don't understand the process.
Right.
So when I first talked to my students about it, I was working at a high school, which is a little bit easier to explain. Mm-hmm. When I was actually pregnant this past year, I was at a middle school. And so I would, go into observed classrooms and kids would be like, are you that lady that's having the baby for somebody else? And I'd be like, yeah, that's me. And how does it work? I'm like, oh, go ask your science teacher. And then they would come find me later and talk to me about it. And I'm like, that's right. Uh-huh. I think I was super lucky to have all the parts of my life and all the people and my work, my church, my friends, even my family, after their initial fears were over, they were super supportive.
You said that you went with Family Source, but how did you find them?
Since we met that first family, just without any agency, we looked at a few different ones and just I read reviews. I looked on some of the surrogacy pages on Facebook, and y'all were the ones that really stood out to us because I felt what I think is so important is that each the surrogate and the intended parents have a true advocate. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not the best, I think, at speaking up for myself.
Yeah. And
luckily I didn't have to really do that anyways in this journey where I wasn't agreeing with anything. That didn't happen, but in case those things happen. Like I wanted somebody to be able to like step up for me. And we felt like that was one of the great things about Family Source. So that's why we went with y'all.
We all, as surrogates, we go into this journey with usually one thought in mind that we want to help another family, but there is a conversation that goes along with it, which is great. Do you mind sharing how you used your compensation to help out your family?
Yeah, so the majority of it we actually put into savings, just because, I mean, I know at one point, like at some point, my kids are going to need things,
Sure.
You know, college, a car, all of these things. So that is what the majority of it went into. The main thing that I wanted, which is kind of silly, but I really wanted a TV on my back porch. So that was like my like push present. I was like,
sure,
I want this. I want to be able to enjoy like the outdoors and have movie nights outside. So that was kind of like the frivolous thing that we like spent some money on. But the majority of it we put into savings, and at some point it will be helpful because my littlest one is a dangerous little guy. So I'm assuming probably medical bills.
If you were to go into surrogacy for the first time, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to yourself looking back on it?
Part of me wants to say, like, really make sure you know what you want. And it's not really because of the journey I went on, because I think I was pretty like certain about like, I want this type of relationship. I don't want to have to go through these procedures. Like I was pretty certain on that. But as I like read people's stories and I see other like testimonials or on like the other surrogacy pages, that's one of the things I've noticed is like, oh, well, I didn't think that this was going to happen. So I didn't say I didn't want it at the beginning.
Right.
Like even like an amniocentesis, like those kind of things that you don't think are going to happen because you think, oh, it'll be a perfect pregnancy. Everything will go fine. Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about. It didn't happen necessarily in my journey, but I've just seen those things. So I think it's really important as you start to go, even whenever you're going through like the matching process, and then especially in contracts, like be really firm in the things that you are, like the things that are important to you. And for me, that was like abortion. And for me, it was somebody that wanted to have a relationship with me. Like those are my two big things. Like I didn't want to sign off and say, like, I'm okay with this, assuming it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And then at week 16, they're like, oh, well, like, we found this. And then I'm asked to get an abortion. Like,
right.
It's kind of one of my main things, because I've seen stories where people think, oh, I didn't think it was going to happen. And then it does. And now you're stuck in this contractual like agreement. So that is, I think, one of my biggest things.
Do you still have close communication with your intended parents?
It's definitely not as often as it was. So like during the pregnancy, it was almost every day we were talking. And if it wasn't every day, it was every other day. Now it's probably once a week, and more like just to check in, or I'll get a picture of him, or I'll send pictures of my kids or the vacation that we just went on. It's not as often, but I feel like it's still just as close of a relationship. Like I got to FaceTime him just last week, and he's just the most precious little thing. And then I got to talk to their other kids. And so it's not just a relationship with like the parents in my journey. Like I have a relationship with their other children because they're old enough and they understand. And so, yeah.